Do you struggle with feeling content while you're sober, or just going back and forth all the time, dabbling in binge drinking, or just struggling to make long-term sober success? We're going to talk about that today. So my name's Coach Jonathan, been sober 13 years, and we're going to talk about two models of sobriety. This breaks down how most people think about being sober, and it also takes into account behavior change psychology. So this isn't just some like abstract thing that I made up, but this literally is how our brains are wired. And it's also exposing why the typical model for sobriety leads to more dissatisfaction or discontentment and less long-term success, okay? So this right here is the typical approach to sobriety. So we're either sober or we're not sober. So whenever you are trying to get off drinking, drugs, smoking, and this can apply to any type of change. It could be adding something like physical fitness, whatever it is, career success. We look at it as a yes or no, like a binary type of thing. So we think about, okay, well, I need to stay off the substance. Okay, if I stay off substance, I'm right here. I'm sober, okay? Now, the issue is whenever we are first getting off of a substance, we are trying to avoid another thing. So whenever I say stay off substance, I'm avoiding substance. So I'm actually looking at avoiding the thing that would make me not sober, which is like using, drinking, whatever you want to do. And so what happens is your brain, your mind is focused on the thing, even though you're trying to think about the negative version of it. So like, don't do that, don't do that. Don't do that. The problem is you're thinking about that. Even though you're thinking about the negative, you are thinking about the thing that you're trying to avoid. So because you're thinking about it more frequently, your brain is more likely to think about it more often. And that's hard because you only have so much willpower in a day. You only have so much ability to will yourself out of something negative. Prime example, you go any type of physical environment where the people are talking about a certain thing or doing a certain thing, you only have so much willpower to avoid what's going on in that environment until eventually you give in to it, right? Why is that? That's because in our brains, we literally only have so much energy that we can consciously focus on something. Eventually the subconscious takes over, and the subconscious is fed a lot by environmental cues, things that we don't even realize or we're not even taking into account. So if you're in an environment that drives something that you don't want to do, then you're more likely to do it. Well, if you're always thinking about don't drink, don't use, you're creating an internal mental environment where you're always thinking about the thing. You're just thinking about avoiding it. That also means that you can't spend any energy on anything else you would do instead. So it also circumvents introducing something instead of. So whenever we are trying to, if someone's trying to lose weight, if they're always thinking about avoid bad foods, avoid bad foods, avoid bad foods, we never change the psychology to think, well, what can I eat? Like, what are the good things I can eat? We don't go hunt down for positive solutions. We end up just feeling like we're missing out, there's not enough, and then that introduces the scarcity mindset. And so scarcity mindset is always going to be looking for more of the thing that it feels like it doesn't have any of. And so guess what most people do? They feel like they don't have when they're getting off of this, right? They don't feel like, let's see, where's my green marker? They don't feel like there's anything fun to do. They don't feel like they have any friends. Okay, they're bored, right? Those are scarcity things. I don't have X, Y, and Z, and that's because your brain is literally always focusing on the things you're trying to avoid, okay? Now, this is why I've never liked AA-NA meetings, because you go there and everybody's talking about, well, I hope I'll stay off of it one more day. I hope I'll get off of it one more day. And I understand that in the beginning. I understand like, hey, I just want to rack a couple days in a row, right? But eventually, like you can use the don't do the thing to get started, but it's not going to sustain you long term. My goal is to help you sustain long term. And so, like I said, I've been sober 13 years, and I don't say that as a brag. Like there's a lot of things that have gone into that. However, there's some foundational things, and that's what this is about. So I like to look at sobriety as, instead of black and white, binary, like side to side, back and forth, I like to look at it as a thing that we are creating inside of what we don't want, okay? So instead of just being back and forth, what I like to think about sobriety, I like to think about a state that we live in, all right? So like my present state. So when I think about being sober, I think about what are the things that keep me in that state. So like really good example is fitness, okay? Because I worked out right before making this video. I just came from the gym. I still haven't actually changed out the clothes that I was working out in. And the reason that I had the idea of this video was like, hey, I just worked out and it put me in the state where I'm more likely to stay sober because of what it does for me physically, mentally, emotionally. So that behavior puts me into a sober state. It's an activity of something that rewards me and makes me feel like this is better than what it could be. So it's a positive reinforcement behavior. But bigger than that, whenever we are working towards an end goal, the biggest way to sustain getting somewhere long term is to think of like the daily, weekly, monthly, yearly behaviors that lead to it and building those into standards in our lives. So like fitness, so for me, like I like to get up early and pray / meditate. So that's just time where it's quiet. You know, whether, you know, I'm a Christian, but like in general, the concept is I get up early and before I allow a bunch of inputs to have input on my day, I allow myself to think, contemplate, pray, you know, create space to make sure that what I'm thinking about is like what I'm trying to pursue is most important. Another one is career. So having career progress. As a man, I think it's very important to have something that you're moving towards. Not at the expense of certain things, but still, I think we're designed to have some sort of objective to push towards. Family, so, you know, big one here would be like spouse, kids, right? For me, I like sports, so I like to play pickleball. I coach guys at the high school. We like to warm up with games. But like these things, they have certain things that make me want to stay sober, but not just for the sake of being sober. Because if your goal is just to stay sober, like just to stay off substance, you'll always feel like there's just not enough going on in your life because it doesn't inspire you to keep going forward. It's inside of these things that you create objectives or things to move towards. And then that's how you stay in a sober state, because now you're not just pursuing sobriety or the absence of substance, you're pursuing a very full life. You're actually pursuing things. And this is the psychology of total mental change, because in the end, what we're really trying to do is for you to be a former drug addict. See, I don't believe in once an addict, always an addict. That's this concept. So like, I'm always going to be pulled over here. This is always going to have a pull on my life. I'm once an addict, always an addict. So there's always something in me that's going to want me to go back to the thing. And so when you have this diagram, it's not just that we have a tendency to think about avoiding and go back. It's like we actually have this belief system where, hey, this thing's always pulling me back. Whereas like over here, what I believe is like once you start building this, it actually starts kind of erasing this stuff. And then it even at some point erases this word to where like you're actually just pursuing like your best self. I mean, I know that sounds cliche, but like the most actualized, you know, however you want to put that, but you're pursuing that version of yourself. At 13 years sober, I don't believe I'm once an addict, always an addict anymore. I know that as a human, I have propensities. I have a past of it. I can see the patterns. There are certain things I just don't do. Like I don't really stay up late. I don't go to certain places. I don't hang out with certain people. I choose that not because I'm trying to avoid addiction, but because I'm trying to choose environments that help me pursue this version of myself. And this is what personal development is. Personal development is not some woo-woo thing. It's actually determining the type of person you want to be way out in the future and starting to pursue those. And the cool part, the way it applies to sobriety, is now we're not just chasing sobriety, we're chasing like this version of ourselves, and that overcomes a lot of the hurt, the pain, and the trauma. Whenever we're like this, we always feel like we're just going to stay stuck here, and that goes around with us, and it impacts how we show up. Like we just show up with our head down. Well, I'm just always going to be a failure, where I can never make that stuff up. But when we start to like forgive ourselves, forgive other people, ask for forgiveness, and even if they don't receive it, and then we start to live true and honestly, and we start to pursue this, you can actually be freed from your past. Like you don't have to live back there anymore. You can actually pursue this, and you can have a life that's totally different. And the reality is, my life right now, 13 years ago, you couldn't have told me I had it, but I just knew back then, I was like, this whole sobriety thing is not just about staying out of substance. What it's about is about pursuing the freed new version of yourself. You can leave that stuff in the past. You can leave that stuff, you can lay it down, and you can move forward into something like this. So that's how you avoid relapse. Not by avoiding relapse, but by pursuing you developing into the best version of yourself. That's how you actually move forward long term. Now, when you're back here, when you're first getting started, it can feel very difficult. But I tell you this, it is literally this stuff, okay? Are you working out right now? No? Well, just start working out every day, okay? Doesn't need to be long, just needs to be movement. Doesn't need to be fancy, man. It can literally just be walking every day, doing something physical every day, okay? Get up early, make time to journal, just to think, to create space. The world is very fast and rapid. Go play a sport, like go join a sports league or something. Figure out a way to progress in your career, whether that's like joining like a coaching group, joining like a mastermind, going to an event, getting fed about how to get better at your career. Dedicate time to your family, so your spouse or your kids. Just make space. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. All this stuff, like you start doing those things, it changes your self-confidence, because now you're showing up in a way that you want to show up. You're actually showing up and saying, hey, I want to be actively involved in the growth and development of my family. And it can just, like I take my daughter to gymnastics every Tuesday. It's only 35 minutes. It doesn't take very long, but by me making space to do that, I'm like, hey, I'm a present dad. And that's like a long-term goal of mine. But today I'm doing it, and because I'm doing it today, even though like I want to be that the rest of my life, it gives me the confidence today so that when I wake up tomorrow, I'm more inspired to keep doing this. That's how you leave that stuff in the past, okay? So appreciate you listening. As always, if you ever want to work with me, you can just hit, click the little link in the bio or whatever. But this content is for if you're not ready to like go deep. Like this content is to help you get started. That's why I make this stuff. Is I care about wherever you're at on this path of sobriety, because I see so many people get stuck here. Like so many people get stuck in this loop all their lives. Like I mean, people that are 60 years old still in this loop, and they never make it here. My goal is to get you here. And then when you start working here, I'd be happy to talk with you. But this right here is just, let's get here, okay? So start deciding like, what are the things that put you in a sober state? What are the things that when you do them, they literally change how you feel about yourself and they help you move forward? That's the stuff you want to prioritize. That's how you get out of this loop of always looking back, avoiding something, feeling like you're never going to escape that thing over there. All right, appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you guys next time.